Russia is now holding massive military drills with Belarus as the U.S. and NATO allies work to defuse tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Moscow says the drills will last for 10 days, after which the Russian troops will return home. Ukraine is now conducting its own combat exercises in response to the neighboring threat. Meanwhile, the White House has approved a plan for U.S. troops in Poland to help Americans escape from Ukraine in the event of a Russian invasion. For more, let's bring in CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and moderator of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan. Margaret, good to see you. The Russian military is staging drills in Belarus. What's the latest?
That's right, and these drills are expected to go until February 20th. Ukraine is also set to begin their war games on that same timetable. But what is really obviously gathering attention here is the fact that top military commanders from Russia have gone into the area, and that this build has now put Vladimir Putin in a position where he has enough forces to stage an invasion if he chooses to do so. But at the moment, these are just war games. Remember, Russia continues to claim they have no intent to use these troops for an invasion, but they're hedging. And we know that the European diplomats are very optimistic that at least the Russians are continuing to talk. We know the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, leaders from other states, the foreign minister from the UK was in Moscow today trying to find an off-ramp for Russia so that Vladimir Putin could back down but still claim some degree of a win here without looking like he is backing down. So there is some hope among European diplomats that I speak to that they are finding a window for diplomacy, although it is continuing to get narrow. The Russian foreign minister in Moscow today was pretty clear. He's very frustrated with what has been put on the table, that there aren't enough concessions.
Well, U.S. troops arrived earlier this week in Eastern Europe to support NATO. What exactly is their mission?
The mission of NATO forces and the U.S. troops that make up portions of those NATO forces is just about reassurance. It's also about containment. These are not combat troops. These are not troops that the United States or NATO would put in the line of fire. They're not required to because Ukraine is not a member. So they don't need to come to its defense, but they are trying to contain the spillover effect. As we know from some of our colleagues reporting, CBS's David Martin reported just a few days ago that the projections could be that a refugee crisis of between 1 and 5 million people could be created by an invasion into Ukraine. So if Russian forces move in, Ukrainian civilians may move out, and that would spill them over into Poland, a U.S. ally. It would spill them into bordering countries. So the U.S. forces are there to just be kind of an intimidation factor, but also a hedge here to reassure allies and to be there to change some calculus on the ground. But they are not being sent to go into combat.
I want to discuss the Army investigation into the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Are there lessons learned that the administration is taking forward to Ukraine?
There are the ghosts of Afghanistan haunting every decision at the Biden White House right now. In terms of lessons learned, there really hasn't been the full-scale accounting, the hot wash, as the military calls it, of what could have been done better. That is still being analyzed. But this is in the minds of every single national security official sitting at the table with the president and those who are at post right now. I hear consistently from U.S. diplomats, current and former, that they want to show they're prepared this time, that there is enough forward planning by the Pentagon and by the State Department, that they're coordinating this time. There had been criticism the State Department waited too long, for example, to give that order to depart Afghanistan, waiting until August 12th when the city fell, August 14th. They don't want a repeat of that in Ukraine, even though it's an entirely different situation. You can drive to European Union countries from Ukraine. It is not the island in some ways, the landlocked bit of Afghanistan where you couldn't drive into friendly country easily. So this is a very different situation, but it is haunted by that concern that the Biden White House wants to look prepared. They want to be cautious. They want to get Americans out, which is why President Biden has said himself that Americans need to leave Ukraine now.
I want to switch gears to a different part of the world. Top diplomats, as you know, in the Biden administration are racing to strike a deal with Iran to prevent it from acquiring a nuclear weapon. What are the chances something can actually get done?
The expectations for a diplomatic breakthrough are quite low. This is a calculation that's being made right now and being negotiated. We know one of the top negotiators, Rob Malley, was just on Capitol Hill this week speaking behind closed doors to the Senate. The decision is based on this question of how comfortable the United States can be with this wolf at the door scenario. That's a term a White House official used in speaking to me about it, where Iran is a threshold state, that they won't necessarily decide to get a nuclear weapon, but they are right at the threshold of being able to produce one. And we know that they are currently producing fissile material to be used that could be used at weapons grade levels in a weapon. They haven't decided to weaponize it yet. So they're right there at the cusp. And that is the decision that the United States and the rest of the alliance there, remember this was an international agreement back in 2015 under the Obama administration, is there enough to still salvage that deal? What we know from hawks in Congress, particularly Republicans, is they are deeply skeptical that you can use the architecture of that old deal and apply it to what they argue are completely new circumstances. That Iran's capabilities have advanced so much that they can't unlearn the technological expertise they've developed. And so you had a letter released by Republican senators, more than 24, saying that they will do whatever they can to stand in the way of the United States re-entering this agreement with Iran. Remember, the 2015 deal lifted sanctions in exchange for Iran putting a cap on their nuclear development. And what we've heard from the Secretary of State himself is it is unclear if Iran can be put back in that box. So this is a real raging debate, and it is something that we're going to be watching carefully in this 8th round of talks in Vienna that is underway right now.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much for your in-depth reporting. And you can watch Face the Nation right here on CBS News. It streams at 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern every Sunday.